Hey guys, Big Joe here, and at time of recording I have made 9 videos analysing Toradora. Now, as I'm sure you can imagine, I've made a mistake. Or 5 dozen. So this video is here to go through the videos one by one, CinemaSin style, and point out all the little mistakes I made along the way. I will be investigating how a seemingly simple show like this was able to provide me with a sense of euphoria, and hopefully we'll be able to answer that question by the end of the series. As the analysis came on, it became less about the investigation and more about what each individual arc was trying to say. Unless that was part of the investigation all along. We know that his appearance bothers him by the hair product he tries to use at the very beginning, and his absolute disdain for being compared to his father, who he strongly resembles. A point I missed here is why Ryuji has so much disdain for being compared to his father. People assume that he is the kind of man that his father was, and part of Ryuji's growth is convincing people that he is not like that. We know that Ryuji is the polar opposite of the man his father was, a man who actually suit the appearance quite well. So it makes sense that he doesn't want to look like his father. He doesn't want to be the kind of man his father was. Over the course of the show, we will learn about family, sacrifice, ambitions, performances, responsibility, and all sorts of themes that are key aspects of life for younger people. For those of you who don't know, I don't really plan out a series of analysis videos extensively ahead of time. So when I wanted to make the point in the very first episode that the show was going to explore all these themes, I hadn't actually watched those later episodes yet for the sake of analysis. So I used my pre-existing knowledge of what happened in those arcs to guess what the analytical takeaway would be. And to be fair, I got performance and family spot on. However, Kitamura's arc is not about sacrifice, it is about frail identity. Minori's arc is not about ambition, it is about priority and inner turmoil, and while the final arc is kind of about responsibility, it's about a lot of other things as well, but I will discuss that when we analyse the finale. I belong to a family where mealtime is sacred. It's the moment in the day where my family gets together to share a meal. Yeah, that's what mealtime means. The idea that I wanted to convey was that mealtime is important to my family because it is a time where we can gather during our otherwise hectic lives. When she is turned down, she is already returned to the status quo. I think you misword. And the introduction arc that begins with a tiger and a dragon separated from each other ends with that same tiger and dragon walking side by side. So this is kind of embarrassing. When I initially wrote that line into the script, I envisioned the end of episode 2, but I envisioned Ryuji and Taiga walking off side by side. But of course what actually happens in the episode is that Taiga is walking ahead and Ryuji is following behind. Now, if I were a more dishonest person, I could say that I was just being metaphorical, but no, I just messed up. Now Ryuji is taking care of Taiga, and Taiga still sticks up for Ryuji where the opportunity appears. So I wrote the part about Taiga sticking up for Ryuji because I wanted to make it clear that their relationship was a two-way street. They were both giving to and taking from that relationship. That point is really easy for Ryuji because he cooks, he cleans, he does Taiga's laundry, but it's not so obvious what Taiga brings to the table. So I said that she stuck up for him, but really she doesn't do that all that much. No, what Taiga brings to the table at this point is that she's just a really good friend. Getting scared doesn't help, so instead, I smash my fears. On the surface, this seems like a positive sentiment. She doesn't let fears get in the way of living her life. We will later see this attitude drive her to breaking point, but for the time being, this perfectly explains why she is someone that Ryuji wants to be like. So to be completely honest, in the plenty of times I watched Toradora before this analysis series, I had no idea what was up with Minori in the last 9 episodes until I watched the Christmas arc to analyse it. And so anytime I reference her odd behaviour before that analysis, I'm essentially guessing what her deal is. Again, if I were less honest, I could claim that I was being metaphorical. It was her unwillingness to face the fear that was herself that led to her breakdown. But again, that's just not true. I just messed up. We more or less learn that Taiga likes Kitamura because he is someone who loves her because of her negative traits. Why Kitamura would be attracted to these traits is beyond me. He does seem to have a thing for tough women, but that's not what we're here to discuss. Not yet, anyway. So I clearly thought that the reason Kitamura had for liking Kano would be something that I'd bring up in the analysis of his arc, but I didn't. Because ultimately I thought that Kitamura's arc was about identity, and his reason for liking Kano had nothing to do with that, so I didn't really think about it. Now, had I been better prepared for this mistake in particular, I could have speculated a reason that Kitamura did like Kano, but I didn't. She's socially isolated and craving an intimate connection with someone who knows her well and still enjoys her company. Kitamura post-Taiga's confession would fit this mold nicely. But you know who else would? Ryuji. Taiga's reasons for liking Kitamura become more and more true about Ryuji as the story goes on. So as a result, she is the first to show genuine emotional affection. The first to realize that their connection is evolving into something beyond friendship. The first to change her mind about their grand plan, and ultimately the one who has to sacrifice the most in Ryuji's pursuit of courting Minori. Okay, so obviously this video is meant to go over the times that I messed up, that I didn't explain things well, or that I could have done better. But there are a few moments throughout this analysis series that I think I actually did pretty well, and this is one of them. I think this point was obvious enough that no one could accuse me of overanalyzing, but it was obscure enough that I wasn't stating the obvious. All in all, this is one of the moments throughout this series that I'm most proud of. She puts on the act around Kitamura because she needs him to believe the act as to not become a threat to it. Okay, so I feel like I could have explained this in the analysis a little better. See, Army's going to a new school and she wants everyone to like her. And because she knows that Kitamura is going to that new school, she needs him to believe that she's this perfect little princess so that he doesn't tell anyone that she's not that person. Now, of course, Kitamura already knows that she's not a perfect person, but she mustn't know that. So that's why she keeps up the airheaded perfect girl routine around Kitamura. As for why she maintains the act around Ryuji at first, I'm not entirely sure. I know she does it later to protect her persona. I swear I'm saying persona here. With a P. Persona. Even though it sounds like I'm saying something very different. The only speculation I have is that she sees the potential benefit of befriending someone who looks as intimidating as Ryuji does. That was a very weakly made point. The implication is that she's probably trying to buddy up with Ryuji because he's a scary looking dude who could maybe scare away her stalker. Obviously, the ironic thing is that the girl she didn't bother respecting wound up being the one to scare her stalker away. She decides to target and exploit one of Army's insecurities, namely her overindulgence with junk food and the effect it must be having. Does this come off as kind of rude? Saying that junk food must be having an effect on Army? Because I feel kind of wrong when I watch that back. Her character model never actually changes, so I think I should have emphasized in that analysis that what Taiga and Minori are doing are externally targeting an internal insecurity. On a thematic level, it introduces the idea of performance, something that Ryuji and Taiga have little to no problem with, but will become a major conflict for Minori down the line. And as someone who truly understands the price of performance, Army will inevitably be a part of her character arc as well. This is yet another case of me trying to guess what was going on in the end of the show before watching it for the sake of analysis. I assumed at this point that the reason Army essentially picked a fight with Minori is because she knew what Minori was trying to do and wanted to spare her the price of performance. But that's not the case. No, she was actually trying to punish Minori for trying to be dishonest. She is in a prime position to do this given that her arc is more or less finished. Again, this is wrong. She does have more character development as the show goes on, especially in the last few episodes. Most story arcs going forward will typically choose a core character to act as its sole protagonist. No, not most. Army's introduction arc, the Beach House arc, and Kitamura's arc arguably have sole protagonists, but the rest kind of split their time up evenly between multiple characters. Although I am very proud of that character select screen I made. Taiga is insecure about the size of her breasts. Now, I could delve into the realistic validity of such an insecurity, but alas, I have never been and will likely never be a teenage girl, so I wouldn't know. So remember when I said that my friend opened up the manga to the worst possible page? Yeah. That story is 100% true, and that same friend gave me some very strange looks when she found this Takagi-san CD in my car. Ryuji seems to be under the impression that Taiga's reliance on him solely comes down to the chores he does for her, which was probably somewhat fed by Minori attributing his value to his willingness to do those things. As I was editing this analysis, I realized that I missed a pretty interesting point here. So I mentioned that Ryuji put his own self-worth into the chores he did for others. But what I didn't mention is that due to his relationship with his mother, that might be the only way he knows how to show affection. Think about it, the only person he loves right now is his mother, someone who he cooks for, he cleans for, he even helps her to bed that one time. That's just how he shows love. Taiga completely rejects this. She takes offense to the fact that Ryuji considers her just someone to take care of. But when she gets the lunch, she realizes that this is how he shows affection. That he doesn't really conceive any self-worth for himself beyond the things he does for others. So when he says that he'll cook her meals ahead of time, he probably says that because he thinks that as far as Taiga is concerned, that's the only thing she's losing. A bunch of amenities. So when everyone else suddenly shows an interest in Ryuji, the way Ami suddenly did in the last arc, trying to help him after they nearly let him die, Taiga rejects the notion that any of them care. In a fit of emotional rage, she goes off on a tirade about how little anyone did. Even if Taiga doesn't completely understand her feelings, she does know for sure that she will not lose Ryuji. Not to Ami, not to her classmates, not to anyone. Ryuji's mine. Keep your damn hands off him. Gonna gush again? The ending of this analysis was pretty swell. So the Toradora analysis series I hope will be the last analysis series I do with such a restrictive title format. The first two analysis videos in the series with alliterative titles were just coincidences. Admiration and Acceptance was called that because Ryuji liked Minori because he admired her, Taiga liked Kitamura because he accepted her. The Price of Performance was just a cool title that I thought up before I even started writing the analysis. And when it came time to Indisputably Inseparable, I thought, well, I've got this alliterative thing going, I should try and keep it up. And while some of the analysis titles fit really well, like The Family Fallacy or The War Within, Ghost Hunter's Getaway suffers from this title format the most. For those of you who don't know what that actually means, the idea is that both Ryuji and Minori are hunting ghosts, or in the context of the allegory, looking for love, and they're getting away on a trip. So yeah, the title's just really convoluted and metaphorical, and it didn't have to be like that, but I stubbornly clung to the alliterative title format. When she reveals the lie, she refers to Ryuji as silly. This comes off as Ami, and by extension the showrunners, critiquing the knight in shining armor trope as inherently immature, and implying that the amount of effort he is going to is not worth the relationship he hopes will come from it. You know what, I wish I could say this was mighty poor wording on my part, but no, it was just a mighty poor attitude towards what was actually going on. A relationship isn't a reward. He's not putting in all this effort for a relationship that isn't going to be worth it. No, the irony here is that his tactics are completely counterproductive. He's only doing all this so that Minori will cling to him, but she winds up clinging to Kitamura instead. And no one even seems to notice that the plan's going so wrong. That is what I should have said, instead of the kind of gross relationship isn't worth it thing. Ami rejects that their experiences are the same because at least Ryuji is able to fight it. Since the start of the show, Ryuji has been putting all of his efforts into dismantling the social stigma his appearance has created. Ami, on the other hand, has to put all her efforts into maintaining the stigma that keeps her isolated. I think this was pretty solid speculation on my part, but it still turned out to be wrong. Ami acknowledges that they are on the same path, but that she is just a few steps ahead. What does that mean? Hell if I know. Out of all our main cast, Minori is certainly the most extreme, the one who is loudest and most involved with everyone else. She shines bright for the first half of the show until she cannot maintain that image anymore, and when that threshold is crossed, she is going to crash hard. This statement implies that Minori would have eventually burnt herself out, but now that I've watched more of the show, I don't think that's actually the case. The reason she burns out towards the end of the show is because more pressure is put onto her shoulders, and as soon as that pressure is taken off, she returns back to normal. So in this arc, we have been presented with 3 types of love. One that is based on admiration of one's partner, one that is based on comfort with one's partner, and one that is based on support for one's partner. As the show goes on, we will explore these different kinds of romantic love in more detail. So turns out those different types of love don't really come up anymore throughout the show, but I will still bring them up again in the finale. When he meets Taiga's father, he unwittingly becomes his pawn, buying into his supposed redemption and missing the obvious manipulation that he had used. I had originally written more on this point, but it was eventually cut for the sake of flow. If you pay close attention, Taiga's father actually seems disappointed when Ryuji starts to say that he can't stick around, but then as soon as he says that he can, he just goes right back to normal. In fact, this manipulation works so well that Ryuji even later says, "I felt sorry for the guy." By the time we get to the second episode, Taiga's father has become a part of her life again, constantly meeting her after school, taking her out to dinner, and just generally being around. Actually, we only see Taiga's father a few times, and the whole point of this is that he's only around when it suits him. Sometimes I can't think of a title for an analysis until it's time to upload it. Sometimes I have to stretch the meaning of an arc to fit the alliterative title format. But the family fallacy was a title that I wrote down before anything else, because the attitude that one must love their family no matter what is just that, a fallacy. An argument that sounds good on paper but fails to stand up to any form of scrutiny. A non-argument used by those who don't understand how abusive people can be, who don't care how abusive people can be, or worst of all, by people who are that abusive and don't want to face any kind of consequence. Toradora is one of the few shows I can think of that sends this message, that tells you that family is who you choose, and that you are under no obligation to love those who mistreat you. That your biological family is not entitled to your love or respect. That the family fallacy is one that deserves to die. Another instance of gushing, but I really like how this analysis ended. It got a mostly positive reaction, and I'm proud of it. So I did a whole video essay on why this arc in particular is lesser than the others. And I even mentioned this very analysis in that video essay. But I just want to start this bit by saying that I'm still actually very proud of that analysis. And when Kitamura refuses to tell her what the problem is, she decides spur of the moment to do whatever she can. The "do what she can" line became a bit of a recurring motif throughout the analysis. So she simply does whatever she can. She does whatever she can. She decides, once again, to do whatever she can. However, I wish I'd just dropped it and worded all those sentences more organically. Just to be clear, I am specifically referring to change in ideology, personality, or worldview. I am not talking about the kind of identity crisis that someone questioning their sexuality or gender identity would experience. To be completely honest, I'm not sure what kind of support they would need, but it's certainly something that I should find out. From the research I've done since uploading that video, if you are helping someone who is going through such a crisis, you listen to what they have to say, only give advice if it's asked for, and you treat them exactly the same as you did before, unless they specifically ask you otherwise. But in the grand scheme of things, it represents the emotional divide between them, when Ryuji discovers that Taiga is in love with him, and he does not know how to deal with that information. It's more like Ryuji's refusal to act on the knowledge that Taiga is in love with him. He still spends time with her, albeit a little awkwardly, but it is ultimately his attempt to cover up the truth that creates the divide. Ami, on the other hand, simply stands up from her usual hiding place between the vending machines, deciding to no longer hide who she is or what she expects from her friends. This is total bollocks. I had no idea why that shot was in the OP, and I still don't. In this very arc, his classmates are trying to match Taiga with Kitamura, something that he has been trying to do for the entire run of the show. But instead of being happy, or relieved, or grateful to have allies in this journey, he becomes frustrated, but he cannot quite explain why. He does explain later how he doesn't like how everyone's trying to mess with Taiga's life, but this was such a weird reason from him that I assumed it was either a glitch in the dub, or that it was just an untrue excuse that didn't really need to be looked at. This is what made her fall for her dad's old tricks so quickly. Now this is a very poor choice of words. She didn't fall for her dad's old tricks easily. In fact, the whole confrontation at the end of episode 11 happened because she didn't fall for his old tricks easily. What I should have said is that once Ryuji had convinced her to give him a chance, she very quickly let him back into her life like nothing had ever happened. Minori tells our main characters that she ruined the star because of a preventable mistake, but this is also how she feels about her relationship with Ryuji. As pointed out by Bomb Squad 85, the star could also represent Taiga's heart, this situation being a warning to Minori that if she doesn't get her feelings for Ryuji under control, this is what she could do to Taiga. For Ryuji, Taiga's apartment has always been the ultimate symbol of her isolation, a cold living space that can be referred to as a house, so to speak, but cannot be referred to as a home. Okay, I know this was a really weird thing to say, it's an apartment, not a house. I was very specifically referencing one of my favourite Australian films of all time, The Castle. So, we have a very conflicted Minori slowly making her way to the Christmas party. Actually, according to the light novels, Minori was actually going to Taiga's house to talk to her about Ryuji. That's when she saw, well, you know. Has anyone ever wondered what would have happened if Ryuji was within earshot? If he heard her and came back? How the story might have played out differently. This was a very strange hypothetical, and the only reason I used it was so that I could easily transition to the fact that Minori was there. But surely with a little more thought, I could have come up with a better way to do that. That's partly why the Lost My Pieces scene hits as hard as it does, because until now, the show has been quite lighthearted and consequence-free. It's been a simple story about two people helping each other get with their crushes, and the crazy hijinks that ensue. But this scene pulls the rug out from under the viewer and makes them appreciate the dangers of that kind of dynamic. The dangers that Ami tried to warn Ryuji and the audience about, but just like Ryuji, we didn't really think about it. It's just a fun little show about high schoolers after all. And then the show drops this bombshell, and cynically smiles at our devastated expressions as it sarcastically spits the phrase, "Now you don't have to feel guilty." I am kicking myself for not having this be the end of the analysis. Everything I said between this point and the end card was just pointless waffle. It should have ended here. Chapter 2. Conflict in Coping. This is the part where it gets good. Fun fact, I actually made a behind the scenes video showing the making of the promised Neverland Red Hot Go and this very analysis. And this little aside was actually going to be part of that video. Chapter 2. Conflict in Coping. This is the part where it gets good. Oh yeah, that behind the scenes video wound up being scrapped. It was going to be super long, unfocused. It wasn't very good. When I first watched this show, I assumed they were stock generic popular girls' friends. The type to stand there and say nothing as their friend goes on to do nasty stuff. Wait, that's not a girl. So when I first wrote this observation into my script, I had a very specific archetype in mind. sort of a popular bully girl character and one or two sort of best friend lackey type characters who just follow them around, gang up on the main characters when the bully character was being a bully, yada yada yada. When I wrote that into the script, I thought, once I edit it, I'll just find a collage of all those archetypes and I'll show that on screen. But when it came time to make that collage, I could only think of two examples. The bullies and lackeys from Angela Anaconda and Crabbe and Goyle from Harry Potter. When I literally couldn't think of any other characters, I decided to just put up the picture of Draco Malfoy. And when I had to re-record some lines, I decided to add in the little, wait, that's not a girl, to sort of acknowledge that it was a bad example. And Minori, blinded by her forget it ever happened mentality, offers ungenuine forgiveness. Chapter 3. Failure to cope. If this seems like a bit of an awkward transition, it's because that's not the way it was supposed to be. There was a cut bit of dialogue at the end of Chapter 2 which was supposed to go like this. But during editing, I decided that that part was redundant, so I cut it out. If I wanted to make this transition less jarring, I should have re-recorded the dialogue to have a downwards inflection on the last word, and to leave a bit of a gap before introducing the next chapter. We find out that she did not, in fact, forgive and forget, or pretend that it never happened. If you ever wondered why I put so much emphasis on these words in particular, it's because they were supposed to be a callback to the point that I cut out of the video, the very same one I talked about in the last mistake. But since that never made it to the final video, these points are just emphasized for no reason. And I believe those are all the mistakes I made over the course of this series. I'd like to thank my patrons, Orion Tran, Quincy Chamberlain, Jaman5, Lars Espen, Shark, Data52, NerxU, Pixcalibur, and Alberto Cruz. Is there another mistake I made over the course of my analysis series that I didn't address in this video? Please let me know in the comments. Thank you all very much for watching, and I will see you next time.